movie history is really tied in with the Egyptian theater, as some of you may know. When it opened in 18 October 1922, the premiere film was Douglas Fairbanks' Robin Hood. And Joe Newman, the director Joe Newman, he used to come here over 20 years ago. He was in his 90s and would show up with a Dodger hat on and talk about if we were showing This Island Earth or Abandoned in some of his films. And he would talk about that opening night because he was here with the Pathé newsreel crew handing film cans, moving film cans, and would talk about how Hollywood Boulevard, when it was a dirt road, and all of this stuff. So there's definitely a Robin Hood lineage here. But for me, when I was growing up in New Jersey, near New York City, there were two movies that I never missed. One was Gunga Din on $1 Million Movie on Channel 9, and the other one was The Adventures of Robin Hood on Channel 5 WNEW. You know, and each station then had their own studio, more or less, of movies. And this movie is, I always say this movie doesn't date, because it doesn't. It's based on fantasy, it's based on mythology, and I think a millennium from now, people will be watching this movie and remarking on how great it is, its entertainment value. It has action, humor, romance, everything. And it has, in my estimation, the one and only person who was born to play Robin Hood, Errol Flynn. The backstory that I wrote about this film in my biography, Michael Curtiz, Life and Film, pretty interesting. I tried to trace back where did this start, and what I found, there was a Warner functionary that sent Jack Warner a memo in 1935 to the effect of, don't you think Errol Flynn would make a swell Robin Hood? And it started there. Originally, guess who they wanted to play Robin Hood? Their #1 star, James Cagney. Could you see James Cagney in tights walking around like this? you know, hey, Little John, what do you hear? What do you say? But Cagney was going through one of his periodic suspensions from Jack Warner. He and Jack Warner got along like gasoline and a match, and they did not get along. In fact, in Cagney's biography, what he called Jack Warner was the swans. And for those of you that don't know Yiddish, you can ask me later in the lobby and I'll explain that definition to you. The first thing they had to do once they decided on Errol Flynn is to get the story and the film rights that were owned by MGM. And they had to pay MGM. MGM retained musical rights. Because believe it or not, Louis B. Mayer wanted to make a musical. Apparently there was some musical version or operatic version of Robin Hood. So MGM retained the rights to that, and Jack Warner paid him the then munificent sum of like $26,000. And when that wasn't enough, he threw in the rights that Warner had for Quo Vadis. It got made many years later, I believe in '51 at MGM. So they got the rights to that, and it was produced by the great Hal B. Wallace, who had taken over as head of production when Darryl F. Zanuck left in 1933. Now, Wallace was a fervent Anglophile. He had a big ranch out in the valley. For those of you LA people, when you go down the 101, if you go up, get off at Woodman, and drive, you'll see the Notre Dame High School. That used to be the entrance to Hal Wallace's estate. And his estate ran all the way up to Magnolia to the wall on Marcia Hunt's property. And wow. He had almond trees and everything. And his house was done in the Tudor style. He was a very, very fervent Anglophile. And so he got a story from Roland Lee that he felt was not contemporary enough, too much stilted, old-fashioned language, so Norman Riley Raine and Seton Miller really get credit for writing the script. And they combed it very assiduously for anything that was inaccurate, because Wallace and Warner Brothers took a lot of incoming over in England for the Charge of the Light Brigade and its wild historical inaccuracies that got the British up in arms. So they deleted certain things like Friar Tuck being said to drink a hogshead of ale when they figured out a hogshead equaled 43 gallons. I don't think even Eugene Pallette could swallow that much. The producer under Wallace was a guy named Henry Blanke, who has really been a forgotten figure in Hollywood history. And he was just a superb producer. He was at Warner Brothers longer than just about anybody. He got there in 1924 and stayed on as a line producer till 1961. And his fingerprints are all over all the great Warner films, Treasure of Sierra Madre, The Maltese Falcon, Emile Zola, so on and so forth. So Blanke was the line producer for this film. The original director was William Keighley, and when you see the credits, you'll see two directors. You'll see Michael Curtiz and William Keighley. And Keighley was a very, very successful director. He was born in Philadelphia, spent a lot of time over in England, working over there, affected tweeds, broke for tea, English accent, all of that. And he had made The Prince and the Pauper with Errol Flynn, and Flynn liked him very much. Flynn did not like Michael Curtiz at all. Their relationship really suffered a mortal blow in Flynn's first starring role, Captain Blood, that made him a star. And because Flynn was very nervous and inexperienced, Curtiz used him and basically berated him and got him angry to coax what was a great performance out of him, which really worked in the short run, but in the long run, it destroyed any comedy or any agreeable relationship between the two of them, particularly on the part of Flynn. The casting, in addition to Errol Flynn, in this film is magnificent. The great Claude Rains plays Prince John as this very effeminate fop. Basil Rathbone, I don't think you can conceive anyone being Sir Guy of Gisborne. Of course, Olivier de Havilland, Maid Marian. Eugene Pallette was Friar Tuck because Guy Kibbe's contract was not renewed by Warner Brothers. Ian Hunter as King Richard, Melville Cooper as the kind of bumbling sheriff of Nottingham. He kind of reminds me of Nigel Bruce in the Sherlock Holmes film. Montague Love, and so forth. So the film started production in '37 up in Chico, California, in a place called Bidwell Park. And you'll see some of the scenes where Errol Flynn is jousting with Alan Hale, and the early scenes in the forest. And the art director, Carl Jules Wheel, who won the Oscar for the art direction in this film. And I believe this film won for editing, it won for art direction for Wheel, and of course it won for music by the great Korngold. But anyway, they had cut the grass there in the park, so they had the prop department of Warner Brothers took stumps, spray painted them green, painted all this stuff, painted the grass green where the grass had been cut to create Sherwood Forest. Unfortunately, what happened is the picture started going behind schedule. One reason, there was a flu epidemic. Another reason is it was just moving slowly. And of course, Errol Flynn was being Errol Flynn. He and Patrick Knowles were up there, and Patrick Knowles was a private pilot. And so what he did is he and Flynn, in between trips to the hotel bar, would rent a plane and go flying around everywhere, so forth. And Jack Warner had to intervene with the Screen Actors Guild, and they actually took the plane away from Patrick Knowles because they claimed he was acting as a stuntman, unauthorized, to get them back on location. However, looking at the production files on this, Keighley put a lot of the light touch and the humor into the footage up there, but Wallace was concerned it did not have the picture did not have the vitality and the action and the effervescence that it needed. He specifically cited some footage of a line of soldiers marching through Sherwood Forest, and the camera was placed too far away, so they all looked like miniatures, so forth. So long story short, he decided to replace Keighley with Michael Curtiz, and this was not a firing, because Keeley was a very valued director for Warner Brothers, and it was put out as artistic differences, which bears a lot of resemblance to the truth. Curtiz, of course, had been chomping at the bit with this, and in fact, there's a memo from Wallace to his producers saying, you know, we gotta watch Mike. You know how he loves to work with mobs and props and the production values on this picture. You know, he may go over the top, so we need to keep an eye on him. But all of the sword fighting, the archery contest, the filmed at Busch Gardens and a country club out in Alhambra, all of that stuff was done by Curtiz, and in fact, they went back and reshot certain footage. There's a scene of a treasure caravan being ambushed that you'll see, and they went back and shot it in the Sherwood Forest area, where the original Robin Hood of 1922 was partially filmed. You see the merry men scooting up and down the trees, and as Curtiz put it, I want the boys to drop out of the tree like fruit. Some of the effects people and the people behind the scenes, Fred Cavins was a Belgian sword master, and he's the one that trained both Flynn and Rathbone in their climactic sword fight that you'll see. Howard Hill was the archer, and you actually will see people, soldiers, other extras in the film being shot with arrows, and they were really getting shot with arrows. I think they paid them $50 per arrow to get shot, and they had all this padding on. And the actual arrows were shot by Howard Hill, it was lovely. A lot of it was redone, where I think the film had 416 scenes, and 302 were done or redone after production started. So they really did not stick to the script in a lot of ways. When Curtiz took over, he ended up, I think, probably directing and reshooting about 75% of the film, okay? And then there was Ernst Korngold. Korngold was classical. He was a prodigy almost on the order of Mozart's. And he was at his home in Vienna writing an opera, and Wallace approached him about doing the score for this film. He said, I'm not the guy for Robin Hood, I don't want to do it. He was renting a place in Toluca Lake. He left Austria, was going to go back, and as Leo Formstein, the head of the music department, was arriving at his house to try and persuade him again, he got a phone call that the Anschluss had happened and the Nazis had marched into Vienna and taken over Austria. So he decided to stick around and do this. And his son Ernst remembers hearing his father through the walls of the bedroom, kind of in agony, going, I just can't do it. I can't do it. And his son, who my friend Dick Erdman knew quite well, said, my father was truly suffering while he was creating one of his finest scores. And I think you'll agree, I don't think there's any music score in the history of motion pictures that better matches what's on screen than Korngold's score. In fact, his son, the music department at Warner Brothers was something special. If you can imagine a music department with Max Steiner and Korngold in the same music department, and both of them were friends and colleagues. However, his son Ernst witnessed a memorable exchange between the two of them. He said, one day Steiner said to my father, tell me something, Korngold, we've both been at Warner's now for 10 years, and in that time, your music has gotten progressively worse and worse. Mine's been getting better and better. Why do you suppose that is? And without missing a beat, Korngold answered, I tell you why that is, Steiner. That is because you are stealing from me, and I am stealing from you. So the final word on this, I think, from the participants comes from Olivia de Havilland. She did not see this movie when it came out, and she was having trouble at Warner Brothers. She wanted to do other things with her career, as she did, and was tired of playing a consort to Errol Flynn. And when she saw the Charge of the Light Brigade, she hated it. In fact, both she and Flynn felt that they were being put in these kids' movies that were for little kids, and they didn't realize at the time how great it was. And so she didn't see Robin Hood until she went with her daughter, I believe, after she had left the United States and was living in France. And she said, it was just amazing. He said the vitality, the effervescence. He said we didn't realize that we were making such a classic film, but we were. And as to Michael Curtiz, she had very few pleasant memories, and she's of working with him, because she referred to him one time in an interview as a Hungarian Otto Preminger. He was mean, he was cruel, and but she said, well, you know, Curtiz was a villain, but I guess he was pretty good. We didn't realize it at the time, but that energy he had and the effervescence, he put that into Robin Hood. So he, quite grudgingly, she said, and I guess I have to give him credit for that. So with that, we have a 35mm print that you're going to see of this film. I hope it's in good shape. I'm sure it is. And this is a special movie. And for those of you who haven't seen this movie on the big screen, I think you'll really love it. It, like I said, it doesn't date. So thank you so much. And let's watch Errol and the Merry Men in the Adventures of Robin Hood. Thank you.